The world's eyes are focused on Ukraine after Russia invaded it just over a week ago, and that came on top of the existing European energy crisis, where shortages of gas in particular have driven up prices and made things difficult for consumers. So the question becomes, what can Canada do to help out, if anything? I'm going to talk to Richard Masson, who's a economist at the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary, about that. So welcome to the interview, Richard.
Good to be here, Markham.
So let me just throw it out to you. What can we do?
We can't do very much. So when you talk about natural gas, Canada has no ability to export natural gas. We're working towards LNG Canada, maybe starting up in 2025, which is a good thing. That'll be our first significant LNG project, but it still faces all kinds of challenges. Coastal GasLink a couple of weeks ago had that violent attack. There's still, lots of folks in that local region who don't support it. So it's not a done deal that we're even going to get a first one on time, and certainly the budget has increased for that. So we don't have an ability to export natural gas, even though Canada has something on the order of 300 years of reserves at its current production rate. So that's unfortunate. On the oil side, we're a little bit better off. We have Enbridge's Line 3 that's now in service, so we can increase our production a little bit to fill that up. We have rail that can allow us to move oil from Western Canada down to the Gulf Coast. There are more loading facilities available in the Gulf Coast now. We're starting to see some heavy oil exports from the Gulf Coast, or some other oil exports as well. And eventually we're going to get the Trans Mountain expansion done, which will add more capacity. But that's not for another couple of years, given the latest delays. So we have a limited capacity to help with the current problems.
Yeah, I guess that's part of this is inherent to the nature of oil and gas infrastructure. It takes a long time to build. And it never seems to be where you want it in crises like this. But I did talk to an economist who was saying that maybe, especially on the oil side, Canada's best bet to help out Europe on that front is to send more oil down to the Gulf Coast, which either then gets re-exported or frees up some of that light sweet crude coming out of the Permian. Because the story is, I guess, that they're increasing drilling now, going to increase production shortly, and maybe that's the way we do it, and we get it down there by rail, since Keystone XL isn't going to be built.
Yeah, I think that's generally what I would see happening. Unfortunately, a lot of the refining capacity on the Gulf Coast is heavy oil refining capacity, and so it is struggling to find the feedstock since Maya's in steep decline. In fact, Mexico not so long ago said they were going to try and keep all their heavy oil back at home and refine it themselves. And of course, Venezuela is not able to ship anything to the US anymore. And so after Canada, which is 3.5 million barrels a day or so exports into the US, Russia had become the #2 exporter, primarily of heavy oil, because refineries in California and the Gulf Coast are designed to process heavy oil. So they really need us to be able to step up and replace that Russian crude, and potentially as they frack more and get more light oil. Yes, it doesn't fit well with their refineries, so it is something they can export to Europe.
Now, what about on the electricity side? I mean, there's a lot of chatter, particularly folks who favor the clean energy, wind and solar and batteries. Any opportunity there? And I was going to say, a lot of chatter about the energy crisis on oil and gas accelerating the transition to clean electricity. Is there an opportunity for Canada to help out Europe on that front?
I do a lot of reading in this area, and I don't see it. Wind and solar are helpful, and they're online 30% of the time, and that's all good. But if you're going to have wind and solar, you probably need natural gas to back it up these days, because you just can't rely on batteries. There's hardly any battery capacity, and it's certainly not economic. And so they can add more windmills, they can add more solar panels, but that's not going to get them the reliable energy they need to run their industries or to run in the winter at night. They could restart nuclear plants that they have been looking to mothball. That would be much more reliable base load. But natural gas is the next best thing. And other than that, you're looking probably at coal.
So unfortunately, we saw Germany say the other day that it was going to rethink its energy decisions, phasing out coal and nuclear, which was quite a turnaround for Germany. So we probably will see a bump up in coal production over the next year or two. So as it stands now, then, Richard, I guess one more area where we might be able to help. Is there anything in the clean tech area? Either clean tech, oil and gas tech, any kind of technologies that might be available, to provide Europe some relief?
I think we have a very dynamic clean tech industry. The company I work with, Fractal, is involved in that. I get to see lots of different companies and lots of different ideas. Many of them are just emerging though. So part of the challenge is to take it from the idea stage through the commercial demo stage into the commercial scale up stage, and then be able to transfer to others. And we're still pretty early in that curve in most cases. So I wouldn't see any near-term relief for the European situation, the pressure that they face. And this is a big deal, right? So when you think about what Russia has available, 11% of the world's total oil production, a third of European gas supply, the fact that things are, getting so out of hand in Ukraine probably means that we're going to be trying to get away from their energy supply for years to come. And so we're going to have to think about this in the long term. How do we manage the transition to green energy in a way that allows us to, get off Russian energy without cratering our economy or prices too high? Eventually, it could be things like, blue hydrogen, those kind of things. But projects, like anything in a big project, is going to take a decade to build here in Canada based on all our track record. And it's not so easy to deliver. So we've got some real challenges in front of us for the next few years, I think, given this crisis.
Well, I've interviewed a few, international consulting firms like Wood Mackenzie, who are, what they're forecasting for the 2020s is continued underinvestment in oil production in particular. And so continued high prices, continued profitability on the part of producers, including in Canada. So I would imagine then that these issues with Russia and countries banning Russian oil and trying to get off Russian energy will probably serve to just underscore that even more. The continued high prices.
It will. I mean, Russia, like I said, is a huge producer. They have a lot of resource. The economic dislocations from all the sanctions, the ruble falling. People can't count on, if you wanted to buy something from Russia, would you actually get it delivered? Could you pay them? And there's going to be just so many implications from this. I heard the chief economist from the International Energy Agency today, and essentially what he said was the level of investment in oil and gas is about on par with what they would say we need to reach net zero by 2050, which means we aren't investing enough to keep production flat. It would continue to decline over the next 28 years. But he said the problem is the level of investment for renewables is only 1/3 of what we need to reach the goal for 2050. And so it would be a huge increase, like $3 trillion a year of investment required in renewables to offset the decline in oil and gas and allow for growing population. And we're just nowhere close to it. We're only 1/3 of where we need to be. So again, it's a complex choice. And that was before the Russian issues surfaced, right? This is kind of last month's analysis. So we're in a real tough go here. And I see, the opportunity for Canada, for Alberta, because we have the basin to produce a lot of oil reliably, because we have the know-how to do it with things like carbon capture that can reduce Scope 1 and 2 emissions dramatically. We have the reservoirs to put the CO2 in permanently. We can be a reliable supplier, and I expect we're going to see a lot more of that being one of our focus areas over the coming few years here, because there's just not so many reliable basins that you can count on until the transition really gets underway.
One final question as a follow-up to a question I asked you about a year and a half ago in an interview about Drubit. And so basically, you ship dilbit, diluted bitumen, down to the Edmonton area, and then you take most of the diluent out, about 95%. You put the rest in a heated car, rail car, and you ship it down to the Gulf Coast. And the company that was entering into a partnership with Conoco at that time said that they could do it. It was competitive with pipeline costs. So
Yeah,
do you see that this kind of a crisis, this kind of shock, we might see some of that innovation now come to the fore?
yeah, I think people are going to look at all kinds of options because they thought, we had enough pipeline capacity until Keystone got canceled. And so anyways, but yes, the first diluent recovery unit has started up at Hardisty. Gibson, in partnership with US Development Corp, they are shipping down the Conoco barrels to the Gulf Coast. I get to talk to folks in the industry. My understanding, that's all working quite well. And so it does give people an opportunity to say, okay, we can see what it costs, how it works, how this is accepted in the market. And that's one more thing that can add to the overall basket of opportunities that sits in Canada. Of course, the challenge is if you want to build more, it's going to take a couple of years to build anything. So it's not something we can offer right away to the current crisis, but it is something that we can say longer term, there's ways for Canada to deliver oil more efficiently down to the Gulf Coast, and that can be a big thing.
Well, I guess there's always the possibility, Richard, that the crisis we're seeing in Europe won't be short-lived, and we may be talking about years of crisis and years of energy shortages. So we'll see what happens to that kind of infrastructure and innovation. Thank you very much for this. Really appreciate your insights.
Yeah, always good to talk to you, Markham. Best of luck.